You never responded, and that absence became louder than any message ever could. What started as a missed reply slowly turned into a lingering presence in someone else's mind, because unanswered moments do not fade the way answered ones do. The human brain hates unfinished loops. It keeps replaying them, searching for resolution, trying to correct what feels unresolved. A message without a response becomes a loose thread, and loose threads invite pulling. At first, the thought is casual. Maybe it was missed. Maybe timing was off. Then doubt creeps in. The brain begins scanning memory, replaying tone, wording, timing. Every sentence sent gets re-examined. Every pause feels heavier in hindsight. The silence grows teeth. It starts biting into self-confidence. This is not about ego. It is about control. When no response comes, control is lost. The mind cannot anchor itself to feedback, so it spirals inward. That spiral feels like obsession, but it is really anxiety searching for ground. Silence does not chase. Silence does not explain. It simply stays where it is, and that stillness becomes a mirror no one asks to look into. People like to believe they move on easily, but the truth is more fragile. Closure is often outsourced to other people. A reply means confirmation. It confirms relevance, intention, worth. When that confirmation never arrives, the brain keeps the file open. This is why unanswered messages linger longer than rejected ones. Rejection at least answers something. Silence answers nothing. It leaves the imagination to fill the gap, and imagination is rarely kind when self-doubt is involved. The mind starts creating stories. Stories about being ignored on purpose. Stories about being judged. Stories about being replaced. None of these need to be true. The silence alone is enough to trigger them. Psychology explains this through rumination. When there is no external resolution, the mind loops internally. It revisits the same moment from different angles, hoping one of them will unlock relief. Instead, the loop tightens. Obsession grows not because the silence was powerful, but because the mind could not settle without permission. There is something unsettling about realizing that attention was never guaranteed. Many interactions run on an unspoken assumption that access will always be returned. A message sent expects a message back. When that expectation is broken, it feels like a rule violation, even if no rule existed. The discomfort comes from entitlement meeting reality. Silence exposes how much emotional reliance was placed on a response. That realization stings. It makes the unanswered message feel personal, even when it is not. The brain interprets silence as meaning because it cannot tolerate meaninglessness. It assigns intent where none was expressed. That assignment becomes sticky. It attaches to the quiet figure and refuses to let go. This is how obsession forms quietly, without drama, without romance. Just a loop of thoughts circling in absence. The quiet figure rarely knows this is happening. Life continues. Days fill up. Attention goes elsewhere. That contrast makes the obsession sharper on the other side. One mind moves forward. Another stays parked in the same moment. That imbalance creates tension. The person stuck in the loop feels left behind, even though nothing was promised. Silence accelerates this feeling because it removes any sense of shared timeline. Without replies, there is no rhythm. Without rhythm, there is no sense of togetherness. The mind resists that separation. It keeps reaching backward, replaying, analyzing, hoping. Obsession is simply resistance to emotional separation. There is also pride involved. Being unanswered bruises it quietly. Pride does not scream, it simmers. It replays conversations, searching for dignity that feels threatened. The unanswered message becomes proof of vulnerability, and vulnerability without reassurance feels dangerous. The mind tries to regain control by thinking harder, remembering better, reconstructing intent. None of this helps, but the effort continues because stopping would mean accepting the loss of influence. Silence removes influence without confrontation. That removal is deeply unsettling. It makes people question their importance, their impact, their place. Obsession becomes a way to stay connected to the moment where influence was last felt. Silence also exposes how much meaning people place on being chosen. A reply feels like being chosen again, even in small ways. No reply feels like being unchosen. That interpretation cuts deep because it taps into old fears. Fear of being overlooked, fear of being forgotten, fear of not mattering. These fears existed long before the message was sent. Silence simply triggered them. That is why the obsession feels larger than the situation deserves. It is not about the message. It is about what the message touched. Silence presses on old bruises without saying a word. Time makes this worse before it makes it better. The longer the silence stretches, the heavier it feels. Each passing hour adds imagined meaning. Each day without response feels intentional, even if it was not. The mind begins to personalize the absence. It stops asking what happened and starts assuming why. Those assumptions harden, they shape emotions. Anger mixes with longing. Curiosity mixes with resentment. Obsession thrives in this emotional confusion. Silence provides no relief, no correction, no release. It simply remains, and that constancy makes it feel powerful. Eventually, something shifts. Either acceptance arrives or exhaustion does. The mind cannot loop forever without cost. When the obsession breaks, clarity follows. The realization settles in that the silence was not an attack. It was a boundary, intentional or accidental. That realization hurts, but it also frees. The unanswered message loses its grip. The mind closes the loop on its own. This moment is quiet too, but it feels different. It feels final. Silence teaches a harsh lesson without words. Not every message deserves a response. Not every moment needs closure. Not every connection survives distance. Obsession fades when this truth is faced. The unanswered moment becomes just that, a moment. No longer a mirror, no longer a wound. Just a pause that revealed more about the mind filling it than the silence itself. The silence did not chase, and that is what made it unbearable. Chasing would have meant interest, tension, even conflict. Chasing would have meant proof that something still mattered enough to pursue. Instead, the quiet stayed exactly where it was, unmoving, uninterested, untouched by the emotional storm forming elsewhere. Days passed with no correction, no clarification, no attempt to smooth things over. That stillness began to feel intentional, even when no intention was declared. In the absence of movement, imagination took over. Scenes replayed at night. Sentences were reread with new emphasis. Pauses were measured like crimes. The silence itself became the main character in the story, not as an aggressor but as an observer. That role reversal cut deep. Power had quietly shifted away from effort and toward absence. No pursuit followed. No reassurance arrived. Life continued without interruption. That continuation was the sharpest wound of all, because it suggested that the missing response was not a loss, but a non-event. The silence did not chase because it did not need to. It was already gone, and that finality echoed louder than any argument ever could. In stories told around quiet regrets, chasing is expected. Someone always comes back. Someone always explains. Someone always feels compelled to close the loop. When that never happens, the mind resists the truth forming underneath. Silence that is not chase sends a brutal message without words. It says the moment did not deserve pursuit. It says the connection was optional, not essential. That realization bruises pride in ways confrontation never could. Pride prefers conflict because conflict confirms relevance. Silence confirms nothing. It leaves interpretation to the imagination, and imagination is cruel when it is cornered. The story grows darker with every unanswered question. Obsession feeds on this darkness, not because the silence is active, but because it is passive. Passivity removes targets. Without a target, frustration turns inward. The mind becomes both prosecutor and defendant, arguing endlessly with itself. Silence sits outside the courtroom, uninterested in the verdict. The silence did not chase because chasing implies need. Need creates vulnerability. Vulnerability invites negotiation. The absence of pursuit removed all negotiation from the table. There was nothing to bargain with, nothing to appeal to, nothing to persuade. This is why silence feels colder than rejection. Rejection still engages. It acknowledges presence. Silence denies even that courtesy. It treats the moment as complete. Completion without agreement feels like theft. Something feels taken without permission. Obsession grows from the urge to retrieve it. Thoughts keep circling the same memory, hoping repetition will unlock a hidden door. That door never opens. The silence remains closed, not locked, just uninterested. That indifference feels personal, even when it is not. The mind struggles to accept that it was not significant enough to warrant pursuit. That struggle becomes the obsession. Stories of obsession often pretend it is about love or anger. Most of the time, it is about control slipping away quietly. Chasing restores control. Silence removes it. The silence did not chase because it was not seeking control. It had already let go. That asymmetry drives fixation. One side is still gripping the rope. The other dropped it and walked away without looking back. The burn comes from realizing the grip was never mutual. Silence exposes that imbalance brutally. No speech is needed. The no explanation offered. The absence itself delivers the truth. That truth is hard to swallow, so the mind keeps chewing on the moment, hoping it will soften. Time behaves strangely around silence. Minutes stretch, days feel heavier. Each notification sound triggers a small jolt of hope, followed by disappointment. The silence remains unchanged. It does not soften, it does not adapt. That consistency makes it feel deliberate, even if it was never planned. Obsession thrives on perceived intention. The mind assigns meaning because randomness feels unacceptable. Silence becomes interpreted as strategy, punishment, or hidden message. In reality, it is simply absence. But absence without apology feels aggressive to a mind craving resolution. The silence did not chase because it was not playing the same game. One side stayed in motion. The other stepped off the board entirely. There is something humiliating about being the only one still thinking about a moment that has already passed. Silence creates that humiliation slowly. It reveals who moved on and who stayed behind. That realization is painful, so the mind resists it by clinging harder. Obsession becomes a form of denial. If the moment is still being thought about, maybe it still exists. Silence threatens that illusion. It suggests finality. Finality feels like erasure. No one wants to feel erased. The silence did not chase because it had no interest in preserving the illusion. It allowed reality to stand as it was. That honesty is sharp. It cuts without raising its voice. Stories rarely prepare anyone for this kind of ending. There is no confrontation scene, no dramatic exit, no last words, just an unanswered moment that slowly turns into a lesson. Silence becomes the teacher. Not gentle, not cruel, just consistent. It teaches that not everything demands a response. Not every connection survives distance. Not every absence hides meaning. Obsession fades only when this lesson is accepted. Until then, the mind keeps circling the same spot, hoping movement will appear where none exists. The silence did not chase, because chasing would have betrayed its nature. Its power came from restraint. Its impact came from non-participation. It did not need to prove anything. It did not need to win. It simply stayed absent and allowed the consequences to unfold. Those consequences were internal, not external. Sleepless nights, replayed conversations, imagined explanations. All of it happened without a single word being added to the story. That is the quiet cruelty of silence. It lets the mind do all the work.